Let's look at more examples of two-way tables and compare them and bridge them into something called the relative frequency table. 2.2 says, city cat, country cat. 200 people were asked if they prefer dogs or cats and whether they live in rural areas or urban settings. The actual values collected from the survey are in the first two-way table. So we have here is a two-way table that tallies up how many people prefer dogs or cats in urban or rural settings. So this piece right here really is our original two-way table, and then you'll notice that we have some totals down below and on the side for the people that prefer dogs or cats and in urban and rural settings. All right, there is that 200 total people. Remember, it says 200 people were asked, and so you'll notice that the totals going across here add up to 200, and the totals going down also add up to 200. And if you add up all of the numbers inside 54, 80, 42, and 24, those will also add up to 200. Okay, so the next table shows what percentage of 200 total people included are represented by a combination of categories. The segmented bar graph represents the same information graphically. So remember, since this is a two-way table, we're really analyzing two categorical variables here. And the one is your pet preference, dogs or cats, and the other one is where you live. Are you in the city and urban, or are you out in the country and rural? So it kind of compares those two. Now, what we have down here is really the same thing, only it's percentages as opposed to straight numbers. What do we mean by that? Well, we're looking at the total people. So if we look at here, this is total people, and the percent that are in each category. So when we talk about the 54 in the urban cat column row there, that is 54 out of 200 total people, right? So 54 out of 200 total people is 27%. 54 divided by 200 will give you 0.27, so that's 27%. All right, so it's representing this 54 people, but out of the total 200. And that 27% number then would be, I believe, this first category here. So that is the urban cat people right here. And let's see if I can write in there. So that is 27% of all the people. So we can do that for each one of these as well. So if we're talking about, for instance, the 21% number right here, so that is a rural cat people. So that's 21%. So the rural cat people right there would be 42 out of the 200. And that's 21% of the people, 42 out of 200. And let's see, the rural and cat, I believe, is this one right here. So this is the 21%. Right there would be the rural cat people, and so on and so forth. Dog people. So we had 80 dog people out of the 200. So 80 out of 200 turns out to be 40%. So those are the urban dog people. So this would be the 40% here. And then the final group would be the rural dog people. And so that is 24 out of 200, which is 12% of the people. So this is at 12%. So it's really breaking down the total people over here in this visual on the right side and what percent are in each category. So notice that the 27% goes from 0 to just over 25 because that's 27%, and then the 27 to I guess it'd be 67 would be 40%. And so it just breaks that out visually as essentially a slice, a percentage slice of the people represented in the bar graph. Okay, so then the next table shows the percentage of each column that had that certain pet preference. Okay, so when we talk about the columns here, we're talking about urban and rural. So this is a column relative frequency table, and the segmented bar graph represents the same information graphically. So you notice the columns up here on our original table were urban and rural. Okay, and the totals that are in the columns for urban would be 134, and the total for the column of rural is 66. So this frequency table just analyzes a column in itself. Okay, so when we talk about the percentages, like the urban cat percentage right here, what that is saying, so in other words, this 40% right here, what that's saying is we're just looking at the column for urban, and we're asking what percent of urban people like cats. So instead of dividing that 54 by 200 total people, we're just dividing it by the total urban people. So out of the urban people, what percent like cats? So 54 like cats out of the total urban people of 134, and that's where we get the 40% from. All right, and then if we were looking at, well, what percent of urban people prefer dogs, then you would have 80 out of 134. And that's where we get the 60% right here. And we could do that same thing for the rural column as well. So it breaks it down into two bar graphs where it just is saying, okay, out of the urban people, what's the breakdown of cats and dogs? So cat, dog. Bigger slice for dogs there, right? And out of the rural people, who prefers cats and dogs? So in this case, you got the 64 that prefer cats, and then the 36 that prefer dogs. Okay? And then we have another relative frequency table. When we say relative frequency, it's like we're analyzing a subcategory, a subtotal within the original two-way table. So this one says the last table shows the percentage of each row that live in a certain area in a row frequency or row relative frequency table. So row relative frequency table. The segmented bar graph represents the same information graphically. Okay, so now these percentages, notice that they are still analyzing the same two variables, cat, dogs versus urban, rural. But the percentages are different now because we're looking at the rows. So if we look back up to top here, if we analyze a row, we're asking, okay, well, there are 96 people in the cat row. And out of the cat people, in other words, what percent of them are urban versus rural? So it's starting with cat people here. Are you a cat person or are you a dog person? Okay, ask yourself that. So we're starting with the cat people, and then, what percentage of the cat people are urban or rural? So we talk about, well, let's talk about the dog one, since we didn't talk about the dogs, or let's focus on the dogs. So if you're a dog person, all right, what percent of dog people are urban versus rural? Where there were 104 dog people, and 80 of them were urban, okay? So out of the dog people, there were 104 dog people, 84 of them, right up here, sorry, not 84, 80 of them were urban, okay? So that should match up with this number here. If you take 80 divided by 104, you should get 77%. You get 0.77, 77%. Okay? And then out of all the dog people, out of the 104 dog people, how many of them were rural? Well, 24 out of the 104 were rural. So that would be 23%. So if we're looking over here, and again, we were just talking about dog people here, right? So this is where our 77% is. It's a little hard to see. Let me pick a different color. So this is our 77% here that are urban. So out of the dog people, 77% of them were urban, and out of the dog people, 23% of them were rural. And we could do that same thing for the cats as well. So we have the original two-way table. We represent that same two-way table as percentages out of the 200 total people. And then we start analyzing them in a little bit smaller categories. So we analyze the columns. So we start with out of the urban people or out of the rural people, how many prefer cats or dogs. And then we can also analyze them in a relative frequency table with the rows. We can start with, in this case, the rows are the cats and the dogs. So we start with cat people and what percent are urban or rural. And we can start with dog people and what percent of them are urban or rural. Okay? So that's how that works. It's maybe a little confusing at first, but if you get into it a little bit and start analyzing, you can start to see that detail. And we're going to answer some questions next.